Hello everybody, welcome to another video by Liminal Spaces. So today we are talking about the movie We Have Always Lived in the Castle. It's directed by Stacy Passion and it came out on September 22nd, 2018. And of course it's based on the 1962 novel We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. I only recognized a couple of the actors in the film. I'm sure that everyone in the movie's done a bunch of other work, of course, but the people that I recognized were Crispin Glover and Paula Malcolmson. I'm sorry if I'm saying that incorrectly. Crispin Glover, of course, got famous from doing Back to the Future, but he was also in Wild at Heart and Dead Men. He's done all kinds of very interesting, crazy roles. I was really happy to see him in this. He's a very interesting actor. And Paula Malcolmson, I recognized her from Deadwood. I think she's fantastic, so it was great to see her as well. I really did enjoy watching this film. It's very strange because I feel like these books must be really, really scary because I think these movies kind of try to fall into a scary category. And when I say these movies, I mean movies like Rebecca, directed by Alfred Hitchcock, of course. They're films that I think are associated with really scary books, but when you take away the prose and you take away the mood that can be created while reading a novel, I don't think that scariness really translates to the film. Rebecca tries, it really tries to be a little bit haunting and a little bit scary. This film doesn't try at all. That's not really what its focus is. So to compare it, I think I would say if you like epic family dramas, if you like Rebecca, or if you like East of Eden by Eli Kazan, or maybe even Streetcar Named Desire. And I know that Streetcar Named Desire is a little bit different because it's focusing on a real working class family instead of a real wealthy family. But Blanche Dubois still comes from a very wealthy background, at least, you know. So if you like those kinds of films, I think you can really enjoy this. And I do want to mention that all of these films that I've mentioned are very old, of course. This is not an old movie, right? This is a very new film compared to those films, but it is in the same vein. So I really enjoyed watching this. I had a great time. It's a really well-made movie. They try to be a little bit quirky. For some reason, they wanted to make it kind of a fantasy movie. There's this really interesting shot where she's walking out of the house to go towards the town, and they put these mushrooms in the foreground. So they're shooting up through these mushrooms to her in the background walking towards the camera. It's a very weird, interesting shot. To be honest with you, I'm not even sure that it really fits in the film because they don't do it very often. But I do understand that the woods are kind of her fantasy world. So I do appreciate that they tried to do that. That's another thing I should point out about this film. It really follows the book. There's one massive change that I'll bring up a little bit later after I announce that we're going to do spoilers. But overall, this is very faithful to the book. If you enjoy the book and you want to see someone try to interpret it on film, I definitely would check this out. I know you'll think the book is better. And the reason that I say that, once again, is because you can't capture the prose of a great writer on film. You just can't do it. The only thing you can do is take the plot points and do your best to represent them in the same way, but you can't do it, you know. There are differences between a movie and a book, obviously. And I believe Shirley Jackson is the kind of writer who takes advantage of the things that only a book can do, which makes it really difficult to make her books into really successful movies. But it is really good. All right, so I'm going to go into some spoilers now. So if you haven't seen it and you do want to watch it, then definitely stop watching this. So I'm going to refer to Chris's deep dive quite a bit through this part of the analysis of the film because he brought up some really interesting points that I think the film tries to tackle. So Chris talked about the two lead characters. You've got Mary Cat and her older sister. And he talked about the differences in them. You've got the older sister who is like this weird kind of 1950s version of a housewife. Now, I do want to say I didn't grow up in the 50s, obviously. I wouldn't have any idea what the 50s were really like. So I can really only speak about it in general terms. But in America, there's a certain stereotype about the way women were back in the 50s and the way men were back in the 50s. It's probably based on truth, I would assume, of course, but it's a stereotype by now. It's so extreme. And this character seems to be trying to live in that world and try to be that stereotype. And then you've got Mary Cat, who's this kind of eccentric, strong, independent, hippie-ish female, and a lot of witchcraft, of course, layered on top of all of that, who fantasizes about living on the moon. Now, of course, it's 1962 when the book came out. By February of 1962, John Glenn had orbited the Earth. He wasn't the first human to orbit the Earth, but he was the first American to orbit the Earth. So that was, of course, big in the news at the time. The Russians had been doing all kinds of amazing stuff in space. They had the first female in space in 1963. And of course, that's after this book came out. But I do believe that the space race was already underway by this time. American culture was already becoming obsessed with space. They were already becoming obsessed with the moon. So I feel like we're getting these two kind of stereotypes of women. We've got this sort of old-fashioned woman, and then we've got this sort of young upstart woman. And I think Shirley Jackson is playing with these two stereotypes. And when I first started watching this film, I personally have kind of a prejudice against really wealthy people. I'm sort of bothered. I don't like watching films about rich people whining about how terrible life is. Things like Mad Men, I could not get into the TV show Mad Men because I just couldn't stand to watch this idiot, massively successful person whine the entire time. It was horrible for me, right? I know it was successful. People enjoyed it. And I'm sure that it had good qualities other than that. But I could not get past that. And when I first started this, I was worried that that was kind of the area that we were going to play in. And quickly, luckily, I realized that that was not the case. This film is not about a wealthy family and the town that it has to deal with, right? That would be like High and Low by Kurosawa. This is not like that. High and Low is incredible, by the way. If you haven't seen that, definitely check it out. It's an incredible film. But that's not really what this is about. In the film, the town is resentful of the wealth of this family, but really the murder kind of takes precedence over that, which I'm really happy about. So very quickly you begin to realize that you have these two women who really have no concept about money or work or anything like that. They are completely taken care of for the rest of their lives. They never have to worry about where food is coming from, where they're going to live. Those thoughts never even occur to them. Mary Cat is worried about change. She doesn't want anything to change, but I believe that her idea of change goes way beyond we might have to, we're only renting where we live and we might have to move in the next 2 years because they might sell the place or whatever, you know what I mean? Those kind of normal things don't occur to these two at all. Her idea of change is really big stuff, like people passing away or people choosing to come and stay with them or people choosing to leave. If her older sister left, I think she would be truly devastated. So I believe that with these two stereotypes and with the idea of money just not even being an issue, she can really look at how these two stereotypes can exist together, how they can benefit each other, and also maybe hurt each other, of course, but what the future might look like in a world where the older stereotype is kind of becoming a thing of the past and the newer stereotype is becoming the norm. Because in the film, it is made very, very clear that Mary Cat is the protector of this house. And she is the protector of her sister. And this kind of leads to one of the really big changes in the film, I think, from the book. Chris did a very good job of laying out all the plot points in the book. And there is a massively big moment in the film that I don't think is in the book. Near the end of the film, their cousin comes back. He arrived at the house near the beginning of the film. He is just a real horrible person all throughout this film. This film makes it very clear that men have not done a good job and will not do a good job of taking care of this household. Their father is described by the older sister as a terrible, terrible person, a horrible, wicked person. And their cousin, who shows up to take over the household, is simply there for the money. He does not care one bit about any of the people in this household. Of course, you've got the sickly uncle who lives there, and he tries to be strong. He tries to be the protector of the household when the cousin shows up, but he's too selfish. He's too obsessed with his papers and the work that he's doing. He cannot focus on truly protecting this household. So all three of the men in this film are just inadequate, completely inadequate for what the women in this film need. So at the end, after the fire, after the town rushes the house and destroys it, they get a hold of the women and they're tearing their dresses and tearing their hair. And there's a person there who has a gun. Watching Chris's deep dive, I realized, oh, that person must be the sheriff. They don't even bother to tell you who this person is. I wasn't surprised that he had a gun because it's America. He pulled out his gun and shot into the air, and everybody was like, oh, we better stop, almost raping these women and tearing this house to pieces, and we better get out of here. My actual thought was, why aren't there 4 other people with guns there who just shoot this guy? But, of course, once you realize, oh, that's the sheriff, then, of course, that's why, right? The town recognizes his authority, and they do what he says. And it's the same thing with the firefighter, the man who's the firefighter. They come up, they put out the fire, and as Chris described, the firefighter takes off his hat, he picks up a rock, and he chucks it through the window of the house, and that's what starts the riot. The minute that authority figure says, all right, it's okay now for us to take out our anger on this house, then the entire town just follows suit. And this is one of the moments where the wealthiness of the family does kind of come through. They talk about this chief of fire brigade. He used to be in love with the older sister, and he wanted to take her away in his automobile. But the father didn't want that. So the father did 3 things. Number 1, he made sure the daughter couldn't leave. He kept the daughter at the house, made them break up, basically. Number 2, he made sure that the boy lost his job. And number 3, he made sure that the boy lost his car. So he basically ruined this kid's life for being in love with his daughter. Well, now the kid is the chief of the fire department, and the town is kind of sided with him instead of siding with the rich guy who did this horrible thing. Another example of the money being a problem is they have a broken step on the back porch. And the father hired someone from the town to come and fix the step. But then after he saw the work that the person did, he said, I'm not going to pay you because shoddy work deserves to be punished, not rewarded. So he never paid the person. So, of course, that person goes down into town and talks about how snobby they are and all that kind of stuff. But those are just small examples of the money being an issue. The real issue, of course, is the murder that took place. That just took the whole town by storm. And also just how different the people are that live in this house versus the people down in town. Because they're so wealthy, they're kind of spoiled, and it gives them a strange attitude in town. But back to the major difference. So, the cousin shows back up at the end after the people of the town have stormed the house. And he says, please let me in. I don't deserve to be treated like this. And he gets more, because he's so selfish, because he was raised as a wealthy person, because he drives a fancy sports car and is handsome, he believes that these women should just do exactly what he says. And as he's talking through the window, he gets more and more angry, and he ends up breaking the door down. And he charges into the house, and he attacks the older sister. He's grabbing her, and he's pulling her towards him, and she's screaming, no, no, no. And Mary Cat grabs a snow globe and crushes his skull with it and kills him. And as far as I know, that's not in the book. And that, of course, is a literal way of establishing Mary Cat as the protector of this family. And of course, they drag the body outside in the back, they bury it, they push the car into an old shed and lock it up. And since nobody really goes up on the property, no one will ever know that that actually occurred. Because on the night of the fire, everybody saw him jump in his car and leave. So as far as anybody knows, he's long gone. And I do have one tiny critique for the film. This is stupid and small, but it's something that I did want to bring up. Mary Cat confesses that she murdered the family. She's the one who put the poison in the sugar. And of course, the sister says, I know. And that's when the sister says that their father was completely horrible and it was completely justified. But that happens right before the cousin shows up and she kills the cousin. Personally, if you're going to make a dramatic change like adding that whole scene, I would have had the confession about murdering the other people after she killed the cousin. I think killing the cousin would have been much more of a surprise for us had we not established that she was already a murderer. You know what I mean? I feel like that would have just worked better if that reveal came after. I think it would have been easier on the actors as well to try to dredge up this huge thing out of nowhere. And granted, the house was ransacked, right? There was a huge fire. Terrible things have happened, but they went and slept in the woods. The night has passed. They feel a little bit more calm. They're coming back to the house. They're boarding things up. It's an all right place to transition into I'm a killer. That's okay. But after you kill someone, might have been a lot easier and a lot smoother, to be honest. But I like that they put that in the film. I appreciated that because I do believe that this film is really dealing with a female protector. Can a female be a protector of a household? And I think Shirley Jackson is saying, yes, that absolutely can happen. Mary Cat is capable of taking care of this household. One part of the taking care of the household that really stuck out to me is the ritual in the evening of making sure everything's locked up. Here in our household, we have a time when we're shutting it down. It's time to shut it down, right? And when you shut it down, that just means that you do exactly that. You go around to all the doors and windows, make sure everything's locked up, close all the drapes. This habit started with us when we were living in Chicago, and we just sort of brought it here. You know, it's a ritual now. It's just part of the family, and everybody's responsible for it. It's not just like I make sure that everything's shut down, right? I do believe that protecting the family should not just be one person's job. I don't think the jobs need to be as separated as they supposedly were in the 50s, right? You don't have a stay-at-home wife and a go-to-work dad, and the wife does everything house-oriented, and the dad does everything work-oriented, money-oriented, right? That's not a thing anymore at all. And I think all the jobs have become shared, which is a really good thing. Except for one thing that I do have to bring up when you're talking about this kind of stuff, and that is I do not like that it used to be possible for one person to go to work and support an entire family in America, and now it takes at least two people to do the same thing. I think that's horrible. I feel like our inflation has just gone insane without our jobs matching at all. We never should have let our incomes get so far behind the price of things in this country. But back to the story. So when I watched this, one part really stuck out to me, and I was feeling like, ooh, that's kind of cool. I think I'll be the only one who talks about this. And then, of course, Chris brought it up in the deep read, and he has a buddy who based his entire basis of the film on this one moment, right? So this certainly was not an original idea, but it did stick out to me at the time I was watching. And that is, there's a point where Uncle John, where Crispin Glover talks about the fact that his niece is dead, that she died in the orphanage. And I can't say, oh my gosh, it's like Fight Club, like she's not really in the room, or it's like Tale of Two Sisters, right? She's not really there. I can't say that because literally the next line is the cousin saying, she's right there, right? So everybody sees her. She goes to town. She buys the food. If she's a ghost, then she's a totally human ghost, right? Like there's not enough evidence at all to support the fact that she's dead. But I do believe that I think Shirley Jackson was maybe playing with the idea that a woman can be both. It is possible that Mary Cat could simply be an aspect of the older sister's personality. She can take care of herself. She can be the protector and be this sort of weird, stereotypical 50s woman. She can do both. And I feel like that might be why that's mentioned in there, just to get people thinking about the idea of, ooh, what if it is the same person? What if it's just an aspect of the older sister's personality? And I really appreciated that. I think it's very cool to approach this as this kind of study of the way women have changed, two different generations of women, and what their responsibilities are and what they're capable of. And can they work together? Can they live together? Can they be the same person? I really feel like these are very big questions that this film is asking. I can't comment on the novel because I haven't read it, obviously. But I do believe the film is all over this. The film ends with the older sister saying that she loves Mary Cat, which is all Mary Cat wants. You know what I mean? Mary Cat protects her and protects this household out of love. She does it because she loves her family, her current family, not the family she murdered, probably. But she loves her current family. She loves her sister. So she protects her sister and she protects the home that they live in. But it's out of love. It's not out of greed. It's not out of some kind of dominance thing. It's not a sexual thing. It's love. It's just pure love. So after her older sister tells her that she loves her, Mary Cat gains strength. And these kids come up to the house and they start yelling these horrible things. And Mary Cat runs to the front door and bursts it open and scares the crap out of them. And they go screaming and apologizing and running away. So it really establishes their roles. And I really enjoyed that about this film. I think it's very interesting. I think it's a subject that isn't touched on very much, to be perfectly honest with you. And it was really neat to see something unique like that. And I do believe it's absolutely worth checking out. Very enjoyable, well-made movie. All right, well, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please hit the like button and make sure to subscribe because we have so much more like this. And have a great day.